So this Tellervo tutorial is going to take you through setting up your Tellervo server. So first thing to do, of course, is to download that. So you can go to the tellervo.org website and onto the download tab, and you'll see on the right hand side we have the various packages for the server. So unlike the desktop package, where we have separate packages, specific packages for each operating system, for the server we have just two main types. So although the server itself is a full-blown a web server with database behind it, and although the components of this are all open source and they're all available for different operating systems, the task of packaging these together in a simple, easy to use form for multiple different operating systems is quite difficult. So what we've decided to do is to go ahead and concentrate on just creating a Linux Ubuntu Linux package, and then for those of you who want to use other operating systems, we're making this available within a virtual appliance. So a virtual appliance is a special tool that you can run on multiple operating systems, and it runs a complete operating system and all the software required within a sort of a window within on your own desktop. So to make all this work, you of course need the actual Tellervo server VirtualBox package, which you can download from here, and you'll also need the Oracle VirtualBox software as well. So the software that actually runs this virtual server. So that can be downloaded from virtualbox.org, and you'll see there are different packages for different operating systems there. So I've already downloaded both of these onto the desktop here. So to start with, we need to go ahead and install the VirtualBox software. For those of you running this on Windows, you'll notice during the install procedure it will ask you a number of times to install hardware devices. So what it's doing is it's creating virtual devices for things like network cards to enable the virtual machine to access the internet through your desktop's physical network card. I'm going to skip. Okay, so that's one of them coming up here now. I'm going to skip over the rest of the installation so you don't have to sit and watch it, and we'll come back in a minute. So once VirtualBox has been installed, we can then go ahead and open it, and you'll get the standard VirtualBox manager, the machine manager will pop up. And as you see in our list here, with no servers yet, of course. So the next thing we need to do is to go ahead and import our virtual appliance that we just downloaded from the Tellervo website. So if we go to File, Import Appliance, and then go ahead and choose the file that we downloaded. Here it gives you a summary of all these settings. One thing to note is that we should really make sure we tick on the reinitialize the MAC address. Otherwise, it's pretty much a complete clone of the original server. And if you were to run two of these on the same network, you may find that they get confused because they think they're the same computer. So make sure you tick this box here, and then go ahead and do import. You can agree to the standard open source license, and this will take a few moments, so I'll come back shortly once this is complete. Okay, so that's the appliance now imported into our VirtualBox manager. Before we go ahead and start that, there's just a couple of things we need to change. So if we select the server and go to settings, first thing we need to do is to make sure that the network has been enabled, and we need to make sure that the setting is set to bridged adapter. That's important, otherwise we won't be able to access the server from our desktop application. One other thing you may like to do is to change the amount of RAM that you give this virtual server. By default I've got it set to 768 megabytes. Obviously as far as the server is concerned, the more memory the better, but obviously it will depend on how much RAM you have on your physical RAM you have on your computer. VirtualBox gives you an idea of some of the best settings, so you should try and head up to the upper end of the green if possible. If you go any further, you're going to start to have problems with not being enough RAM to run your actual operating system as well. So I'm going to leave it at 768. So we can now go ahead and start our server. So one thing to note is that this is a very bare essentials Linux server. So I've trimmed out all the sort of additional packages. So there's no pretty parts to it. It's just a pure plain command line server. If you want to go ahead, you can actually go ahead and install a full desktop. A graphical desktop, so that people can, so you can see, get a bit more of an idea of Linux as a whole. But this isn't really necessary for the day-to-day running of the Tellervo server. So you've now come to a login prompt. So the login username is Tellervo, and the default password that I've set is dendrochronology. Okay, so because this is the first time that you've logged into your server, it will bring up a little wizard to go through for some of the settings. So if we click enter on there. So first thing it is asking you is to set up your keyboard. So a number of these questions are basically resetting some of the standard questions that would have been asked when you would have installed the operating system from scratch. But because I've already done that for you, it's currently set to the the standards that I use. So it's got a US English keyboard and US English time zone. So if you want to override that, you can click yes and go through a step-by-step wizard. I'm just going to do no because I'm happy with the English layout. Yeah, so here we go. We can change the time zone. So just to show you, you can do yes, and it should give you a screen where you can choose where you are. So there we go. It's still set to New York. Okay, so now it's going to get you to give it a new password. So we don't want to, the standard password at the moment is dendrochronology, so we want to make sure we change that so that it's nice and secure so that people can't hack into your server. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And so the next stages are setting up the database itself. So the first thing it's asking was the name of the laboratory. So let's just put in my test laboratory. And the next thing it's asking for is an acronym. So the naming of our samples in Tellervo is based on a fairly standard scheme that many labs use. And the beginning of that is typically a single letter code to sort of denote the name of your lab. So I'm just going to put a P for Peter. And again, now it's asking for another password. So the password we entered just now was the login, the standard command line login password for getting into the server. We also have a second password which is used to access the PostgreSQL database itself. You're unlikely to need this password again, but the only time you may want to use this is if you're accessing the database directly, if you're wanting to run queries directly on the database. But that's pretty advanced sort of operation that most people won't want to do. So you can go ahead and create a password and just make sure you keep a note of that somewhere. So it's going ahead and creating the database now. And there we are. It's set up the web service, and it's done a quick verification of all the main parts of that. And you see there we have a list saying that they all passed. And right at the bottom here we have the URL at which where our new web service is located. So let's go and check that that's all working okay. So we can open up just a standard web browser. And if we type that URL in now, you'll see just a very simple welcome page just saying that the web service is up and running. So that's great. So this URL is the address that you'll need to give to your users that you want to access, who want to access your new web service. And that's used within the startup wizard when you set up the Tellervo desktop application. So it'll ask you for the URL of your server, and that's the URL you need to give it. Okay, so that's the server pretty much up and running. Just a couple more things before I finish. So this server needs to be up and running every time you want to access your database. So most of the time you can just minimize this and keep this running on your on the taskbar at the bottom. When you do want to shut it down, if you click on the standard close button here, you'll see you have a number of options. So the first one is to save the machine state. So that basically is kind of like putting the machine to sleep, which means that you can wake it up very quickly and very easily. But the problem with that is that the machine doesn't realize it's been asleep, and things like the clock will be out of date until it does its regular sort of poll to check the time again. So you may find you have problems with sort of the update dates in your database. So I wouldn't recommend using this first option. And the bottom one here is power off the machine. That's pretty much like just pulling out the power cable, and so again not really a very good idea in case someone is trying to access your system. If it's doing anything and you interrupt it, you could cause yourself some problems. So if you make sure you just use the middle one here, that sends a request to the service to shut down, and it closes all the applications and shuts down cleanly. Backing up are obviously a very important thing to do. So the very simplest and easiest way of backing up your system is to export your appliance. So by going to the file export here, you can basically create an identical package to the one you used to create your server, but of course this will contain all the changes that you've made, any changes in your database. In a later tutorial I'll go through a bit more of a detailed, a proper database dump, a way of getting the actual data securely saved and exported off, so that you can save that, in an off-site backup. But hopefully that should give you enough to get you up and running and give you a chance to test out the system. So if you have any questions, just drop me an email and I'll see what I can do to help you out. Thanks very much.